this is your host, Julia Napini. I am a clinical and forensic social worker who owns a counseling practice and a consulting business. In this show, we discuss the challenges of being successful in business while maintaining your integrity and staying true to yourself. Join me while I interview other professionals and share insights from life and experience. Let's talk about RingRx, our latest sponsor. RingRx is a high-quality, HIPAA-compliant telephone, text, and fax communications platform. They provide seamless, cost-effective communications for behavioral therapists, medical practices, hospitals, and other healthcare providers. RingRx is designed for modern healthcare environments. They offer customizable features like a phone app, automated patient outreach, voicemail, after-hours call routing, and top-quality desk phones. Try RingRx for free today at ringrx.com. And if you sign up using the code CLIMB, you'll get 15% off your monthly bill forever. Conditions apply. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Compassionate Climb podcast. Our guest today is somebody that I met through a networking event that she has been putting on for our community. And I actually got to speak at a speed dating event for healthcare professionals or helping professionals. And I got to hear from one of her staff, and the way that they spoke about her led me to believe that we are very much in alignment. So I immediately connected with her and wanted to have her on the show. So Kristen Acciari, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, let's start off with talking about these events because you've had 3 now, is that right?
3. Yep. 3.
And I've been lucky enough to attend all 3. And so the first 2 were at the same place. We all were in one room. There were appetizers. We were all able to mingle and get to know one another. And then you're collecting people's business cards and contact information and sharing that afterwards. And it was lovely. And then the most recent one was a little bit different and actually preferable to me. So as an extroverted introvert, I find it can be really challenging and draining. And I have to get myself in the right headspace to go into a room full of people that I don't know and mingle and start conversations and get to know people. Whereas the most recent one with that speed dating format, we have a set amount of time with someone and we get right to the heart of it. And by the end of the event, I had connected with everyone. So tell us how that all came to be, why you decided to structure it in the ways that you did.
Yeah. So I first of all, the extroverted introvert is just like so relatable, right? Like it's like, and I feel like for all the therapists that go to our events, it's like, yeah, we love to get right in it. You know, like, okay, we're one-on-one, get into it, you know, cut out the small talk and just like, what are we here for? Right. So yeah, this is something that came out of, these events out of a need, like really, I wanted to go to an event like this. Like I was so tired of going to networking events and talking to people who were lovely humans, but had absolutely no professional interest in like what I was doing and maybe needed a little bit of education on like what mental health therapy even was, like what I was talking about when I was saying that I'm a therapist and, you know, sharing about our practice. And so I'm very much in the energy of like collaboration and network and relationships. And I think it's so lovely to know other professionals that do what you do and also do things like sort of adjacent to what you do.
Yes.
In Rhode Island, it's almost like you can't not. In Massachusetts, it's like so close. You know, it's like it's easy to know plenty of people and build those relationships. And then you have these networks that you can like trust sharing with clients. Like whenever I recommend somewhere to a client, I always want to know like what I'm recommending. I want to have some sense. I don't want it to just be like a person whose name I found online. I want to I feel like I'm endorsing it to some degree that I'm saying it, you know, and so I want to make sure, you know, my clients are in good hands. And plus it's just nice to connect with other people. So I really wanted to go to a networking event that was like, oh, people get it. And what they're doing is very relevant to what I'm doing and vice versa. We might be able to connect on different things that are similar and then aid each other where we're different.
Yeah.
And so that was where this sort of idea for like a helping professional specific networking event was born. So that's where that came from. Yeah.
Yes. Well done. I really enjoyed them. And the other piece that I'm thinking of too is how beneficial it is to have people where you can almost not need to do a lot of that preliminary conversation and get right to the heart of what it is that we do. You don't have to do a lot of that explaining. And I am a business consultant, so I help a lot of clinicians who are starting or expanding their practices. And I very oftentimes reference these events and am encouraging my consulting clients to either seek out something like that or create it for themselves, because it is such a great way to put faces to names, really understand the essence of what somebody is all about. So like you said, you're not just referring like a cold referral, it's a warm handoff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they've been great.
And like our clients trust us. And so we want to like be worthy of that with whatever we're recommending. Yeah. Also, to be just really fair, I've met some like really incredible, I mean, like the people who are helping professionals in our area are amazing people. Yeah. So it's also just really lovely to meet and build relationships that way. Totally. And also like for anyone that, you were talking about consulting and people who are growing their own business, to like not feel like you're operating in a silo, because it can be a very isolating, very lonely experience. So it's like, oh, here are other people. There are other people out there. They're doing similar or the same things. And, we can relate on different aspects and you feel, connected. You're not so you're like in your own space. Yeah.
Well, and one final thing I'll say about it, just recalling my previous dating experience, where it's a similar idea where if you're doing that and you're not coming to an event or like speed dating to specifically meet people, then you have no idea who makes up the room that you're in. Right. And when you're walking in and you know that it's your people and you know that they're all coming there with a very similar intention, then I think it really just transforms the whole experience. So cool. So for those of you out there that have not experienced something like that, definitely keep that in mind. I think we need more opportunities like that to connect with one another. So fill us in on the evolution of your group practice and when it started, how it's grown, what you specialize in. Would love to learn more and share that with the audience.
Yeah. So let's see. We'll time travel back to 2014. We opened in 2014. The Holistic Heart was born, and it really started from a place of like, first, obviously started with me, right? So I was working in an agency setting. I had really great support actually, which is not always common in this sort of as a nonprofit space. But it was extremely behaviorally oriented, and I'm more eclectic and holistic. And so I felt like I really wanted to like branch out and have a place where I could explore different styles of working with people. And so at first I went into private practice, and then pretty quickly I was like, I personally was feeling like I was hitting a wall with clients with talk therapy of like, it is so helpful and there can be like so much insight gained and so much growth. And also there's a space where the efficacy felt like it was just sort of stalling out. And I was really realizing like for me personally, I wanted to bring more embodied stuff into the work, right? Like, so it's like, oh, okay, but there's more like, you can't just know about the feelings. You have to feel the feeling. How do we like move people into these places and have them have experiences that change the way that they feel in their body in any given moment, to help aid this like, intellectual understanding and insight orientation that I love, by the way, very insight oriented. I love that part. And so I was looking for a space that had like a studio or a space where we could do movement and incorporate some other kinds of, like modalities with people and do things like workshops and emotional education even. I feel like there's all these different aspects to mental well-being. And, talk therapy is one very valuable one. And there's like a lot of other things that we can be doing to get at that mental wellness space. So I wanted to try to bring that all together in one place. So that's how it started. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. And so tell us about your expansion journey. So at what point did you decide to bring on more staff? What does the practice look like now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so interesting because at the time that we opened in 2014, in the agency I worked at, I was specializing in working with autistic folks, and I had a pretty full caseload with that, and I was really like repeatedly turning down referrals because I just could not. I couldn't. I was like up in the high 30s per week, and I was like, this is not sustainable, right? But I didn't have anyone I trusted or that I knew to refer them to, and so I was just sort of turning people away. And I did also, in the same timeline, acquire that space with the yoga studio, and I was renting out the offices. That was always my idea. I wasn't ever thinking that I was going to employ people, so. Never say never, because that happened pretty quickly, actually. But so it was that space of like, I have more than I have built this reputation. People are seeking me out for this, and I just am turning business away. And I can't hold it, right? Like, so I've generated a reputation that has people wanting to work with me or trust me, and I don't have any way of offering services to these people. So it felt like an opportunity to explore, like, what's that next step? Yeah.
Wonderful. And so at what point did you hire your first clinician?
2015. So about a year in, I hired my first clinician. Yep. And she was both a licensed clinical social worker and a certified yoga teacher. Same for me. So bringing some of that somatic stuff into the sessions as well. So right in alignment with, and that sort of set the tone for, this is what I'm thinking. I'm thinking people who are, formally and traditionally trained and also have maybe training certification in additional areas that they might be able to bring into the therapeutic room. Yeah.
And how big is the practice now?
Now we are big. We have 15 clinicians other than me. We have 2 non-clinical staff. We have a yoga teacher and an office manager. And then we also do an internship program. So at any given time, we have 1 to 2, maybe sometimes 3, but not often, interns at a time. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay. So we'll do like broad overview and then kind of get into more specifics. So in reflecting back on this expansion, which was not necessarily intended, and it seems like it happened very authentically, what would you say are the biggest things that you learned? If somebody is listening and they're considering expansion and not really knowing fully what that could be, what would you share with them?
Oh, I've learned so much. I feel like so very much. Yeah. And I think in some ways it's really fun to sort of not know what you don't know in those very beginnings, because I think a lot of times now I try to forget what I know to like let myself think bigger and get outside the box. But in the very beginning, you didn't even know what the limitations could potentially be. And so I think that's a huge asset at this point. Once you're in it for a long time and you get in the nitty gritty with it, you can sort of stop yourself before you start. Like, well, I could see how this might play out and But in the beginning, it's just like this big picture thinking, like, well, why not? And you don't know why not. So you try it and it actually does work, So I think in some ways it's really a huge gift and really beautiful to not know everything and just sort of trust yourself and take chances on yourself and know that you'll get there. Like, you don't have to have it figured out. You start and then you figure it out as you go. And you can always pivot, and you can, you do a little, then you get information back from that. You iterate, you figure out where you might need to tweak or pivot or not listen in. But there's no sort of feedback information without that initial action, right? So it's like, take action, see what happens, take some more action, see what happens. So yeah, I think it is like almost like don't try to over prepare would be my main takeaway, because there's so much information out there and it's all speculative until you're putting it into practice. Who knows,
Yeah, very true. I think now in my role as consultant and also being a group practice owner myself, and similarly, it was not my intention to grow a group and it happened very naturally. And then before I knew it, we had grown to a team of 30. And when I look back, I think about how I definitely think that there are some fundamentals. And if you have a really solid private practice and you have things that are working well, your marketing is working, you're generating enough referrals, you've got a solid intake process, you've got your paperwork down and caught up, you've selected a business entity, like these basics are there. Then I feel like it's a lot easier when you bring someone on because you have something to acclimate them to. And then from there, I think a lot of it, you do still want to maintain this level of openness and possibility and optimism and continuing to think outside the box, like you said. So I think striking a balance between the two has really been a beautiful thing. And a lot of the people that work with me are looking for a roadmap. Well, what do you do first? And then what do you do next? And I think with group practice, especially, it is really challenging to give that really concrete plan because not everybody knows exactly what they want it to be. And we're dealing with humans and it's so subjective and it can obviously shift and have different iterations as you're growing and expanding. Has any of that been your experience?
Oh, absolutely. And I think you have to sort of start with where you are, right? And it's like, what do you think you want it to look like right now? And take a step in that direction. And because you won't know, like you won't have any more information than you have right now unless you do something. And then maybe what you learn is that like, oops, wrong step. I actually feel like I'm more aligned over here, but that's still excellent learning. So like, you know, say you onboard somebody and you learn from either your interview process there of like, maybe I could have, you know, like one of the things we shifted maybe about halfway was a little more behavioral, like example type questions in our interview. Like people are totally going to say like, yeah, I can do that. Yes, I do that. You know, like give me like describe a time when, or tell me about a time when, right? Like that kind of, but we didn't know to do that at first, but we were having experiences where we're like, ooh, how did we miss that? And then what questions can we ask in the future to get clearer on what we're looking for and whether or not that feels like the right fit both ways for people, you know? And so little things like that, it's like all along the way, you do one thing and then you're like, oh, okay, maybe it worked like 80% of the way. How do I make up for that 20%? You know, what do I need to shift or change in order to like get closer? Or was this like, I tried it and I absolutely hated it. And now I've got to figure out that's one less thing that's on my potential things that I could like narrowed it down somehow. So I do really, I'm a big believer in like some type of experience because it's all learning.
Absolutely. That was a great example. So I'm wondering how you have found the balance between the clinical side of things and the business side of things. So managing your own caseload and then managing a team. What have you found the most helpful to be able to balance those two worlds?
Yeah, that's the dream, right? Is to balance those two worlds.
Right?
Yeah, I actually, full transparency, I am at the point now where and this is just as of like January of this year, so it's only 3 months. But I am only doing supervision. So I'm not doing my own client caseload. So I'm doing supervision. I'm also in school for my PhD. So that's been very thank you. Extremely time consuming so there's that too of like, how did I want to make space for, you know, that endeavor and seeing how that was going to play out and planning that into the business because it's like, hey, at any time something could happen and I could have to jump in. So what do I do to sort of hold those spaces, you know, because people have life events and things happen and, you know, so unexpected can occur. So you have to sort of have contingencies and at the same time pursue your own, you know, furthering and interests and stuff like that. So that can be an interesting balance to navigate. But when I was doing client caseload and the working on the business, and even now as, you know, I'm supervising, there's like this intentional setting time for planning. It's like at
Mm-hmm.
this point in time. So whether it's, and I'm a very much an external processor. So I meet with one of my team members and we talk through, we have like a brainstorming planning meeting, at least once a month, just to like have these sort of big picture conversations. And then I put time aside weekly around what's the execution of the things that we talked about in those big picture planning, right? Because like otherwise they stay ideas and that's really lovely, but you know, they've got to come into the world or they're not making any shift. So a both and I think finding people that you really trust to help execute too, and not be the only one that's sort of implementing all of the things.
That's so helpful. Well, as somebody who transitioned my entire caseload to my first 2 full-time hires, I give you so much credit for carrying a caseload for the length of time that you did with that level of responsibility and growth for your practice. So tell us about how that transition has been for you, seeing as it's still relatively new.
It is, and it's like a both and here. So I will say, I say both and a lot because I'm very holistic and dialectical here. But so I feel like I have sort of been push-pulling in this space for years. So I'm sure that might not be unfamiliar to somebody that's listening.
Right.
But it's like I did get rid of my caseload completely back in 2020. Then COVID happened. And so I hopped back in the fray there, just like so many people were reaching out and needed support. And so I was like back in the ring with the direct work. And so it's sort of been this thing that I've been back and forth with for years. And the caseload has been relatively small over those last few years, like 10 to 15. So it's not like a full-time caseload and also working on the business, at least for those last few years. And it definitely does feel like a nice shift for me because I feel like they're two very different parts of my personality that need, like they're very different aspects of self that show up to like run the practice and think about the practice and expand the practice than the, Kristen who shows up as your therapist and does the one-on-one work. So it's been navigating those two things together.
But you're still maintaining that clinical space in that time for supervision, just a shift in the role. So it sounds like it was definitely a long time coming and kind of a little bit of a back and forth. So what contributed to your decision to go back to school?
I've always wanted to go for my doctorate, and I sort of took some time, a good amount of time actually, after my master's to just like make sure that was not a like this is the next step, like you just do this after your master's thing, and that it was really something that I wanted and that I felt like would serve me. And I love to learn, and I love to share what I learn and be able to like apply it. And I very much am, and this sort of goes into the last question you asked me about like the clinical load and the supervision too, but I really love to work with newer clinicians and all of our clinicians, even the very seasoned licensed ones, because I feel like there's so much nurturing and like our own work that we have to do to be good at what we do. And so I feel like I've transitioned from like doing that work with clients to doing that work with other therapists, where it's like, all right, how are you doing your own work? We structure our group supervisions very much in like a self-inquiry based way. Self of the therapist is a big focus for our team. And, using that sort of supervision space to really genuinely mentor. I really love that role. And I feel like it's really, I get a lot out of it too. And so I feel like furthering my education is like another way to make sure that I'm offering sort of the most evolving kind of experience with that. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So, the things that stick out to me the most from the most recent networking event and connecting with one of your clinicians was the length of time that she had been with you. And I think, secondly, the way that she described how supportive you were of her pursuing other things.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in my almost 4 years now of expanding, I
Mm-hmm.
have helped 10 of the clinicians in my practice start their own practice.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not a common thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would love to hear your thoughts about your mindset around what has contributed to your ability to do that and do it confidently. I'm assuming that rather than a scarcity mindset,
Mm-hmm.
you have much more of an abundance mindset. So I'd love to hear more of what contributes to you being that type of a boss.
Yeah. Well, first of all, would be so super hypocritical to be like, I did this, but you shouldn't.
Let me
Right?
get in the way of you doing the same thing.
Yeah, that feels like very like out of integrity, right? It's like, yeah, I mean, I know why I did it, so I can completely understand why somebody else would. The other thing is like, I really believe in all of my therapists. I have excellent clinicians, like
Yeah.
they're stellar at what they do, and like I applaud them, and I think they should be doing it for as many people as they can in whatever ways feel the best for them. And I really do. Sadly, there's no lack of people who need support, right? Like there's, and that is an unfortunate reality, but it is a reality. And like, so there will
Yes.
always be people who need help. And I think everyone has a unique thing to offer. So like, I'm really about the fit too. Like, it's like someone needs to be with a person who really gets them and can help them. And that
Mm-hmm.
is like, I'm not at all under any, misconception that would always be me for somebody or that would always be someone else. It's like, having a lot of different styles and approaches and personality types, it just helps people have more options for what would really genuinely serve them best. And so I'm like
Mm-hmm.
100% on board with that. I really encourage my clinicians in the practice and beyond to like embody, like be themselves. How do you communicate like who and how you authentically are, because that's going to be just right for some people and not at all for others, and good for them to know up front both ways.
Yes.
And so I really believe in all of that stuff, and I love to see people succeed. I think that I care about all my employees very much, and so if they can do something that's going to make their life better, I'm all for it. I'm happy for that. Yeah.
That was beautifully said. I don't know that I could have said it better myself. I resonate with every single point that you just made. And I'm so grateful that there are group practice owners out there because I've heard so much of the alternative. I obviously had my own experience, which was not positive, which has led me to be the similar type of group practice owner that you are. And in my consulting work, there are so many clinicians that I helped start their own practices that were coming from really toxic environments or places where they didn't feel that they could come forward and be honest about what their aspirations were for their own career. So how do you manage the emotional component? It is very evident, and you even said it, how much you care about the people that work for you, how incredible they are as clinicians. We do pour a lot into our team members, especially if they've come to you as an intern and maybe stay on, or they were a newer clinician and they become seasoned in the time that they're with you. So how have you managed the emotional component that comes along with somebody being such a vital member of your team? And everything that you just said was so true, but it is also a loss.
Yeah. Oh, it's totally a loss. And I think, well, it is. And does it have to be fully, I guess, is like, my thought is, if someone leaves in a way that is like, in integrity, that is like, hey, we've talked about this. We know this is coming. Your clients are well supported. We've got plans. This is, like we've got transitions. We know what's happening. Everyone's on board. I think it doesn't have to be a loss really, or, it certainly is like, now that person doesn't work here, but also, I think that's good for the new interns and pre-licensed clinicians coming in, right? There's more maybe space and supervision openings for other people who are bringing their career in, and they're like shifting into that part. And, like, can we keep some kind of mutual connection, like is what beautiful, amazing things are you doing in the world? And like, might we be able to collaborate in some way? Might you come back for some things? Might I refer people to you for something very specific? Like I think that professional relationship can continue if things are like all above board and communicated and it feels like things are ending well. There's no reason why it has to be like an uncomfortable thing. Yeah.
When it happens in the way you just described, it really is positive turnover. And as you spoke to before, there is no shortage of clients that are out there seeking mental health treatment. And so if a clinician can ultimately transition out of your practice into their own, they're taking their caseload with them, those clients are well served. And like you said, that is an opportunity for more clients to receive services within your practice. So wholeheartedly agree. But you also have clinicians that have been with you for a while. So retention, what are some of the things that you would say in addition to what you've already described? Clearly you view them as a human being. There's appreciation. You support them in their other pursuits. What are some other things that you do that you feel have contributed to clinicians wanting to remain with you for the long term?
Yeah, I think there's the main thing that I would say is I really, I try to provide an experience working in our group that is, I think, hard to duplicate outside of. Like there's like a membership within the team. There's like intentional fostered learning experiences. There's lots of collaboration and interaction, like we absolutely like do a lot of focus. Like I said, I'm like, so I think my big thing is like, in order to be a good therapist, you have to know your stuff. And so we do a lot of personal development stuff. So it's like at work, you can like be at work, getting paid to be at work to like learn about and work on yourself. And I think that's a unique thing that is not always a part of a work experience, right? And
sure.
But I personally see it as extremely relevant to our work as clinicians. So for me, it doesn't feel ancillary at all. It's like, this is foundational. Like we need to be managing our own stuff. So we're not like all over the place with, like we need to be doing good work with people that's grounded in like a clarity of our own understanding ourselves and doing our own healing work. So I think fostering that sort of personal alongside professional growth. And then the other thing is I would say, I do get very individualistic and try to really see each individual person on the team for who and how they are. And so, for some people, they really value like security. And so maybe how they're compensated is more about consistency and security. And other people really value freedom and autonomy and being able to take a lot of time off, whether that's or flexibility in their schedule, whether it's paid or unpaid, but other people would really like it to be only paid, right? So you learn about what people value and what is going to feel like meaningful work for them, what will feel like you are honoring their contribution in a way that resonates for them. So there's that. And then also the like, what type of therapist do you see yourself as, really nurturing that like you signature, like who am not just the therapist, but who am I as a therapist? What's my style? What do I like to work with? And that's always evolving, but really like intentionally nurturing that through supervision and helping people get clear on themselves and the strengths that they bring to their work. So I think it's this combination of individual nurturing and group interactive, like experiential nurturing that's very, that you just aren't going to have on your own, right? Which is what it is, like it's okay and it's a cost, but I think people sometimes try to keep at least one foot in holistic heart because they're like want to be a part of some of those things, right? Yeah.
I can't blame them. So I'm very curious about what you spoke on first there with opportunities for them to really develop themselves. Any examples that you can give of some opportunities that you provide for them to do that while they're working for you?
Yeah. So the most recent thing that we did in a group supervision, just as an example, and this is like just one example, but we did this values sort of exploration of finding our own why. So I don't know if you're familiar with Simon Sinek's work, but he's
Yes.
marketing, right? Like cross industry, right? We don't need to be in the therapist world. But so we were doing that start with why, and we were doing, like what are some stories with meaningful events, and listening to each other on what have been some meaningful events that you've had in your life, and what did the people who were listening to you hear about what was important to you, and let them reflect that back to you. And now that you hear those things, what does that tell you about what matters to you, and how might this be pointing to your why? And then how does that show up in your work? And, sort of taking ourselves through that process. But I think there's multiple really beautiful opportunities there. One, you're getting a lot of clarity, hopefully getting, people are reflecting back to you in a loving, attentive way what they're hearing from you, which we don't always have experience of. Even as therapists, we don't always have opportunities to be reflected back to. And also we're sharing with each other on a level that's a little bit deeper than coworker level, right? So it fosters this, and people can choose the stories based on their comfort level. They don't have to share something vulnerable, right. But if it is a little bit more vulnerable or it's more personal, we're starting to get to know each other as people and as humans beyond the role. And that really creates connection too. And we might find out that we have more similarities or things in common and connect further on those things. So there's lots of opportunity in experiences like that. But that's just one that we did recently. Yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was a great example of really capturing the essence of what you were describing. So share with everyone, I know that you are providing trainings as well. So what are the topics and how can people find more information? And then obviously if people want to follow your practice or, reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah. So I am new in the world of like continuing education trainings, right? But I am so very steeped in the literature doing my dissertation that I'm like, I have a lot of information around this topic. And so I thought, how I'm always like, I love to receive information, but I also am like, and then what do I do with it? I don't want to information just for the sake of information it sort of falls flat for me, right? It's like, well, what do we do with that? How do we help people with that? And so my area of focus is on autistic identity. I myself am a late diagnosed autistic ADHD folks. So I am like part of that community and very interested in the experience of that community. I have a long history of working with autistic folks, and that's just funny, right? Like we're drawn well before I knew that I was part of that community. And so that's the topic is like neurodiversity affirming care for late diagnosed autistic and ADHD folks is what I'm doing right now. I see myself in that sort of neurodiversity, autistic, ADHD space. And I'm very lucky to have a couple of really great clinicians who are also really good in this area as well. And so we're like brainstorming different things we can do for this specific population, because I think services haven't caught up in this particular area. And so I'm really passionate about getting the information out there. And so that is the topic of the trainings. And for our practice, it's just the Holistic Heart. It's holisticheartri.com. We also, as part of our like commitment to like accessibility and mental health, we do one free workshop every month that anybody can go to. And so, you can see those there. But yeah, that's everything.
That's wonderful. And if people are interested and they're in the Massachusetts or Rhode Island area on future networking events, should they just follow the Holistic Heart on social media?
Yeah, if you follow Holistic Heart, we collaborate with ME Psychotherapy. So we co-run those. So you can follow either of us to get info on socials. And also Holistic Heart's website has like a networking events page on it. So there's like a little section that says professionals, and you can find our latest and what's upcoming, or you can also just reach out to us to get on like an email list so that you make sure you get it direct to your inbox. But yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time and being willing to be on the show. And I really appreciate you being the type of practitioner that you are. So good luck with the remainder of your program. And thank you for providing these trainings.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate it. It's been fun to talk today.
Likewise.
If you like what you're hearing, please rate and review. This will help others find us and benefit as well. The Compassionate Climb podcast represents the opinions of Julia Napini and her guests. The information provided is intended for educational purposes only and should not be taken as legal advice. If that is what you are seeking, please consult an attorney.